The war on drugs is our government's slogan, ideology and policy for dealing with drug addicts. 1 billion is spent on treating drug addicts, 4 billion on criminalising them. With 1,500 drug deaths a year, 2 years ago I took my views to Parliament.
We need to start regarding addiction in all its forms as a health issue as opposed to a judicial and criminal issue.
The war on drugs has to end. I believe the only way to solve this problem is to listen to the addicts themselves and end criminalisation.
As you can see, the syringes there and other bits and pieces.
I'll tell you what was mad is that I've not been anywhere like that since I was a drug addict. So like sort of going in there and like that smell as soon as you go in, and then the desperation and the hopelessness. And in the end it just makes you feel a real sense of despair. Do you ever feel that it's pointless?
Do you ever feel it's pointless? No, I don't. No, I don't. Because the default for me is we're being positive. A, we're being positive with the local community, but B, we're trying to get these people, we're trying to break the cycle. And if we don't do that, who's going to pick these people up?
For me, the police pursuit of drug dealers complicates effective treatment for addicts.
I'll tell you what I reckon, Charlie. I'm thinking this is a health problem, not a crime problem. Just because they look like they're all buckled up and emaciated and... You know, a criminal, the attitude of a criminal is there's some power in that, right? If you're a sort of a person that's making dollar from your criminality. But that's just, I think,
the victims.
The victims. The ideal situation is no one takes drugs, especially people that, can't handle it. That ain't an option, people just are. So for me then, it's like, well, how do you organise it so that the people who are going to take drugs no matter what are handled in the best possible way? And there I think there's room for improvement.
It could well be, Russell. Could well be.
Only one of the 3 people in the house has been arrested. No drugs are found, and 27-year-old Samantha hasn't been done for drug possession or dealing, but for an outstanding theft warrant.
These outstanding warrants, how come they're theft related, are they? So why did that happen?
Because of drug use.
It's nice to see that someone else is giving them a bit of compassion. We try to, but they see the uniform before they see the person.
I know, this is it, this is why it's the law that's important, the law.
Yeah.
Can you remember why you first started using?
I was 12 when I moved here. So yeah, the first people that I met were users. So at that age I thought it was normal.
How many times have you been arrested?
A lot. I've been to prison a few times. I get out of prison, nowhere to live, so then I have to find somewhere to stay, which is normally smokers, because they're the only people that are willing to put you up. And then they want paid rent in drugs, so yeah.
It's really hopeless, isn't it? Hopeless scenario.
But it's an ongoing cycle for me. In prison, back out to nothing. So just back.
You must feel tired, mate.
Yeah. Fed up. Yeah.
Don't worry. I know our circumstances are really, really different. I'm a person now that's got money and I don't use drugs and all that. The feeling that you have now, I understand that feeling. I understand that feeling. I understand that feeling. Oh, it's a drag, isn't it? What about all the money you got spent on like all of the raid and all that and all of the business today, and then the real problem is housing and treatment? That's why my focus, Casey, is like...
I agree, but I'm employed to do one bit. No matter as being the minion at the bottom of the pile, I can say whatever I want to say, but it's not going to change anything. It's got to be hierarchy. I've got to start looking at why we keep doing this. And it's the same old people, so they've got to find their way of cutting the cycle and stopping it.
Samantha, she gets nicked, she goes to prison, she comes out, she uses drugs, she gets nicked, goes to prison. So it's not like people think that the sort of a compassionate and altruistic perspective is some sort of wet, woolly liberalism. It's not. It's pragmatism. It doesn't work.
Watch where you stand as well.
Yeah, I will. Bloody hell. God damn, man, it's really brutal. Philippe's a drug worker in Birmingham who wants me to see how criminalisation of users has driven them to taking their drugs in a dirty, unsafe, visually cliched place just a few hundred yards from the city centre.
people are going to inject heroin, but unfortunately they've got nowhere safe to inject.
Oh, what? So people are using here?
So absolutely, yeah.
Oh,
So
man, this
mind
is dark
yourself.
shit.
I can't believe this is like in England, Birmingham, you know, second city, and this is where people are looking.
Yeah, there's lots of needles.
Yep, yeah, and people have slept here, as you can see.
Oh man, it's fucking medieval.
You know,
this isn't the consequences of addiction, this is the consequences of criminalisation.
yeah, sure.
But the addicts Philip tries to help in Birmingham know that being viewed as criminals makes their lives even more dangerous.
I nearly died twice and he saved my life. I was just getting to the point where I couldn't get myself, and police come and I had 3 underneath for a pin and stuck it in one of my artery.
Oh, fucking hell,
So
mate.
15 people we know haven't been that lucky.
The thing I can't get past is it's like when you're using in conditions like that, you're like an animal. You're being treated like an animal.
right.
Not having any rights and not having any respect and not having any, I don't know...
Dignity.
Dignity.
One person who agrees that the war on drugs is completely unhelpful is the woman who runs Kids Company. I meet Camilla today surrounded by kids at a summer play camp the organisation runs. But it's not these kids I'm here to learn about, but the ones that turn up at her street centres in London, Liverpool and Bristol.
We have 82% of our children arrive addicted to substances at our street level centres.
The children?
Yeah. 82%.
80% of the children?
90% of the children and young people were introduced to substances by their immediate carers and sort of people around them.
Camilla knows life is difficult enough for kids brought up by parents taking drugs, but the drugs being illegal just adds to the stress and tension the kids feel.
A lot of them are traumatised by everything that goes with illicit substance taking. So the drug dealers that burst in want their debts paid. The children often see firearms, the threats, you know, so it's not just the substance taking that is the problem, it's the whole lifestyle that goes with it that terrifies the kids.
Seeing how highly emotional the children are when they arrive, Camilla has commissioned research with this neuroscientist bloke to test the impact all the stress has on the children's behaviour.
So the studies show that their amygdala, a kind of a key part of the brain involved in threat detection, is overactive. Really what you're seeing is that these kids are adapting,
Right.
but they're adapting in ways which can increase vulnerability to things like addiction and to things like mental health problems. So many people, as you know, start taking drugs to self-medicate because they've got negative emotions, they've got hyperarousal, and that's what these kids experience.
That's why I did it.
And drugs are one effective way to kind of manage the pain and manage that arousal.
So what these children first need is at times of distress to be able to turn to someone to soothe them and calm them. And if they can't find the soother or the person who's going to help them solve problems, then the next best thing is to become oblivious to the problem.
Yeah.
And drugs then do that for a lot of kids.
It's interesting that there seems to be at least a theoretical relationship between conditions of deprivation and poverty, sensitivity and hypervigilance and drug use. So if you criminalise that, it's like criminalising poverty by proxy, isn't it?
Well, that's certainly one argument. I think the problem about criminalisation is that it fails to look at why people are in this position in the first place. So why does somebody get to a point where they have to use drugs?
You can't keep blaming the individual and say this individual is irresponsible, you know, they're a drug addict or they're a criminal. If we have large numbers of vulnerable individuals, we are as a society responsible.
Because drug taking is illegal, there is a stigma around addiction that prevents progress. This is why I think we should decriminalise all drugs. But one question is continually asked.
I can't imagine
But don't you think one of the reasons why politicians and why society tends to keep drugs illegal is one of fear that kids, that young people will turn on perhaps needlessly?
I think there is some legitimate fear around drugs. Drugs, I'm not a big woohoo, let's take drugs type person. Drugs can be incredibly dangerous and negative. What I'm saying is making them illegal isn't working. It doesn't work. It doesn't prevent people from using drugs. I'm talking about...
It didn't prevent you?
No, it made absolutely no difference. I think no difference at all. I think
Except presumably you lived in fear of, at some point, possibly running up against the law.
It complicated the situation and it made it more difficult to approach the situation for what it is legitimately, a disease which requires therapy and compassion.
But it's always interesting to hear the other side of any argument. So we spoke to Professor Neil McKegney from the Centre of Drug Misuse Research.
The temptation to use drugs, the allure of drugs, is so great. There has to be some sort of sanction. You might say it's hard to make the case for sanctions because we're all humanitarian and we like the idea of providing treatment. That's socially acceptable, personally acceptable. But if you don't have any barrier to use, then it seems to me you run the real risk of use increasing. But I also think it's really important not just to see drugs from the perspective of the addict. I mean, it's true that you are a very passionate supporter of treatment and recovery, but it's also true, and it may be unfashionable to say it, that society still needs protection from the amount of criminality that's associated with drug use. So whilst prison may not be necessarily the welcome option for a drug user who's offending, it's nevertheless an important part of the protection that society needs to have from those who are actually committing those crimes.
To be like, you know, frank, Neil, for me this is a personal issue. You're personally calling me a criminal for something I help. You're sitting there saying, Russell, I'm a criminal.
But you've accepted that. You have already...
No, I don't accept it.
No, but you have already...
I don't accept it.
No, but you
I think society's making a massive mistake calling people that are unwell criminals.
You've already accepted that you have broken laws.
No, I don't. It was wrong. It made the situation much worse, Neil.
I'm not going to be an advocate for the current situation being rip-roaring success.
No.
It is not so bad that you would need to say, well, let's actually do away with criminalisation entirely. There is still a role for the criminal sanction against drug use.
For me, the experiment of prohibition has lasted a century and has done nothing but increase a black market economy, gangster warlords across Mexico, suffering and poverty wherever it's been introduced. And so on a personal level and on a political level, it just isn't working. It's time to try something else.
What I'm saying is that you can look at drug use from the perspective of the drug user, but you also have a moral obligation to look at drug use from the perspective of society. The majority of people are not using these drugs. Now, from the perspective of the drug user, you can say, I don't want all this hassle in my life. I don't want to be criminalised. I don't want the police knocking down my door. And I agree with you. I wouldn't want my door knocked down either. But at the same time, it is important that society has a standard.
I think the important shift that we need to make as a culture is to end this sort of moral judgment of people that have an illness and treat them compassionately.
But why? What's the problem with a moral judgment?
It's not like criminalisation hasn't been given a fair crack of the whip.
So I hear that. But you know what you're doing there, Russell? You're taking a small sector of society in numerical terms, the addict population, and you're saying society's entire drug laws should be shaped to meet the needs of that small sector of people who have become addicted. But that doesn't make a lot of sense because the vast majority of other people are not addicted.
Tonight at 10, a new debate about decriminalising drugs prompted by a Home Office report. There's no evidence that tough sentencing affects the levels of illegal drug use. That's the main conclusion of a study which draws comparisons with other countries where certain drugs have been decriminalised and drug abuse is reported to have fallen.
The same report reveals that 71% of the British population know that the war on drugs can never be won. So what do we do? In Portugal we have a case study. Since 2001, drug possession is no longer a criminal offence.
I want to introduce Russell to one of my heroes, João Goulart from Portugal, who introduced the big decriminalisation in Portugal.
Well, pleasure to meet you. Now we have 11, 12 years of those policies in practice, so we acted as a living laboratory.
What are the most positive and negative surprises?
The most positive is decrease in the number of AIDS infection. That was really dramatic.
Dramatically dropped.
Yes. We have a small increase in the average use of illicit substances among general population.
Small increase in recreational use.
Yes, but on crime, there's a decrease in the petty crimes.
Because I suppose the live experiences nullify the conservative arguments that keep things the same. We don't know what would happen, it's dangerous, there will be crimes, these places will become drug havens. In Portugal this hasn't been the case. So this is really good news.
With drug-related deaths down an impressive 75%, their policy of sending addicts to treatment rather than court and prison seems to be working well.
It's now supported by all the politics.
Even the most conservative
yes, even those who voted against.
No one would go back.
No.
To hear the other side, I asked Mike to introduce me to someone from a part of the world extensively involved in drug trafficking and production, but where drugs are still illegal.
I'm the chairman of what we call West African Commission on Drug.
I wonder if it would work for the whole planet, the experiment that's been tried in Portugal and Switzerland and the legislation that's been tried in Uruguay.
Well,
what do you think?
I believe that we should keep our eyes on those experiments. Let's call them experiments.
Just call them experiments.
Yeah, let's call them experiments.
They're experiments.
Yeah. Now, if those experiments succeed...
How long?
It's too early. Let's give it 5 years.
Not for 5 years. So
Yes.
after 5 years, we can say this has been a good experiment.
Yeah.
Despite his talk of waiting 5 years, a couple of months later I read that the West African Drug Commission changed policy. It now says the harms of criminalisation far outweigh those of decriminalisation. So all drug use should not be considered a crime, but a matter of public health.
We'll keep in touch.
Thank you. But it's not just the suffering of addicts I see, it's the misery, violence and degradation in communities in Britain and across the world that current drug laws exacerbate.
Global drug laws need to change because thousands of people are dying. There's an illicit economy. People are getting butchered left and right all over Mexico. People are getting hung in Pakistan and all over Malaysia for something that's not a moral issue. It's not a moral issue. It's a health issue. I think we all agree within ourselves, don't we? We already know the answer. Knowledge is acting on wisdom. Don't know why we're pretending that we don't know what to do. It's like a bizarre facade. It's peculiar that we would do this as human beings. Why are we? It's confusing, Mike.
I asked Mike, who was once Britain's drug czar, which is weird, why he thinks Britain isn't one of the reform countries, given that David Cameron 10 years ago thought it should be.
The position Cameron was pretty vocal and said that the drug war wasn't working, didn't
Yeah, he was on a committee 10 years ago that said exactly that, the drug war is not working. And actually he said the UK should go to the United Nations and propose reform, which nobody did in those days. So it was quite a good report. Now in government it's a very difficult issue because the two parties don't agree on it. And so they prefer not to talk about it, which is a shame because the UK is potentially a very progressive country, but we are paralysed at the moment.
Is it because there's no votes in drugs?
I think that's the judgment they're making, is you take a big risk if you are looking as if you want to be into drug reform. So most politicians will say, I don't want to be criticised by the Daily Mail or my opposite opponent.
In the spirit that we're here today, I'd like to say, hello, I'm Benjamin, I'm an addict. I've been in the House of Lords for 27 years. I've been in recovery for 30. I have met and discussed drug policy with every single Home Secretary. Although the World Health Organization, the Health Service, and God knows everybody else, tells us that addiction is a disease, in the world of politics it still isn't really a disease. It's a moral decision, which is why it's still a crime. And until we get over that, we won't make the progress we need.
A recent drug survey showed how at odds the government's position is with what normal British people actually do, take or think. 30% of normal British people have taken illegal drugs. That's 15 million people. 3 million are still using them and 1 million have a drug problem. That's 1 million unnecessary criminals that the government are at war with. So what does Lord Benjamin Mancroft, a former drug addict and posh person, think underpins the government's reluctance to change?
The ultimate weapon of criminalisation in this country is the 1973 Misuse of Drugs Act. But if you look at the papers that are available, public papers, about what the thinking was at that time in the late 60s and early 70s, what they were really saying is, we think we've got this problem with drugs, we don't really understand it, we don't know what to do about it, so the obvious thing to do is to ban it, we'll sit on it. And bearing in mind at that stage of proceedings there were, I think, between 4,000 and 6,000 registered addicts in the whole of Britain. So it was a tiny problem, and it's just kept going. Since then, no one's had the nerve to make this huge change. The first thing that's stopping it is a generational thing. And that is that people of my parents' generation didn't understand anything about drugs when I was using them. And that applies to politics as well. Margaret Thatcher, John Major, did not come from a drug-taking generation. They had probably never come across a joint in their lives. But now we have a younger generation of politicians, Tony Blair, David Cameron, who
by
have come.
implication may have come across.
Well, if they haven't, then their argument that they're in touch goes out the window.
It does, doesn't
everybody
it?
in this
Which
world
is it? If you're a drug addict or you're not in touch.
Yeah.
Which one is it, Cameron?
We live in a democracy and our MPs will do what they think their constituents want. And currently, large numbers of MPs don't think that their constituents want us to legalise drugs. And whereas you might get an MP sitting quietly in a room with the door closed to admit, yeah, I know we really ought to legalise, collectively they won't at the moment, because they perceive that they would lose votes by doing that. When you're in politics, language is hugely important. When we were talking about the issue around criminalisation, you said actually what we're talking about is regulation.
Because I suppose regulation is a bit more of a conservative sounding, oh, I'd like to regulate. Like people aren't going to go, it's not such an edgy word.
If I said to anybody, do you think we should regulate drugs more efficiently? They'd say, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's legalisation. Now, if you were to say to people, actually, we have between 250 and 350,000 very ill people in this country, and they're wandering the streets, and they're so ill that they've been driven to crime, and they're living in the most appalling way. Do you think it's a good idea if we pick them up and put them into nice, clean healthcare facilities, which would make them better, so they don't have to commit crimes, and actually they can go out and get a job and have a family and become constructive members of society? Who wouldn't think that's a good idea?
Describing it in military terms, war on drugs, chucking lots of people into prison only to see them come out hooked on even harder drugs, clearly doesn't make sense. You should be treating people who are addicted as people who need help and treatment. As it happens in this particular government, I can't get my particular coalition partners now to agree to further reform. But you're right, it has to change, because you quite rightly say warehousing people behind bars and simply just ejecting them into normal life and somehow expecting them to find their feet again it's sort of patently absurd.
We have an obligation, we have a duty to bring about change, and sometimes also to lead.
The public have moved much further on this than the political class have. I'll give you a very good example. The Sun newspaper. 5-10 years ago, the Sun newspaper would never write the kind of things they write now. It's fantastic. I think the best-selling newspaper in the United Kingdom is actually now one of the leading advocates of drugs reform. That's a big change.
It's just the pace of it. That's what makes me sort of somewhat despondent about the political system, and I don't suppose there's probably anyone in this country who's more despondent about the political system than you. But like, what I personally feel is it all takes so long.
I think we'll look back at it 50 years' time and think, what?
How come we're like prepared to sit out a 50-year lump of bird on it when we could just go like this? Let's make moves now. You'd like it to go quicker.
Of course I'd like to go much quicker.
The system's broke.
Look, it's slow. It's
going to happen. I'm just saying, do you want to do it while you've got jobs, or do you want us to take care of it?
I'm not as pessimistic as you are.
I'm not pessimistic, Nick. I'm not pessimistic. And I hate people that say this.
Impatient.
I'm practical. It's just like sort of once I know a thing now. I know a thing. So once I know it, I don't like all this meandering and nonsense. Right, why are we kowtowing to and pretending we don't know something?
Can I tell you why? You might know something. It might just take other people a little bit longer to know things. And in a democracy, you need to persuade other people.
Mate, don't pull the democracy move on me.
I can guarantee you I can have people sitting in the seat from completely different places. It's a bit too risky.
Yeah, but they're not drug addicts. They've not been through it. They're talking from a position.
They're still members of society. That's the point. That's the point. You can't. You and I might disagree with what they might say, but you can't somehow sort of dismiss their responses.
I think you and I both know that the reason that this legislation takes so long to move is because there are certain people who benefit from things being how they are, that a society structured as it is beneficial to the people that are at the top of it, and the people that say...
Well, I totally agree with you. There is a ridiculous, outdated, deeply sort of shrivelled, unheroic cowardice in the British political class, where people will talk bravely about reforming drugs when they're not in office, and the moment they get in offices like this, they could beat each other. It's coming. Change is coming. It is happening in what you would call baby steps, and it will continue. There's just no doubt in my mind whatsoever that the idiotic sort of so-called war on drugs that we have today will simply not persist. It will not.
That's just not enough, Nick. It's just not enough. I mean, I bet if we ran some tests in the toilets over there in Westminster, I think we'd find out that there's some interesting powders. So if these people are prepared to use drugs themselves, if they're prepared, they're not subject to the conditions, to the rules, to the penalties that we're subject to. And so for us, it is an emergency. It's not an emergency. Some people have got 50 years. Some people are struggling to get through the next few seconds, mate. And that's who we've got to speak on behalf of.